Hey guys, today's technique tip is going to be on the squat. I'm going to help you perform and perfect the squat, really be able to maximize the movement that you're doing and increase that weight and difficulty of each movement that you guys do perform. Now Colby's here to demonstrate for me. We're going to do it in two fashions. We're going to use a kettlebell as a front squat or goblet squat style squat, as well as a barbell squat. So you can see both ways and how they are basically the same but slightly different. All right, so first one we're going to do is a goblet squat. Now before we actually start with the goblet squat, we're going to perfect some of the positioning and work from the top down. First piece of the proper squat is always going to be the foot position. Now with the feet in the squat, you want to make sure that those feet are about hip width apart. I also like to think about lining my inside of feet on the outside of my shoulders. So if you guys look, he had a straight line straight down from his shoulders down to the inside of his feet. He's in a correct position to start his movement. He will slightly turn out his toes as well, and that will be his base of support. Now that we've got our feet in the correct position, our toes slightly turned out, there's one more piece to the proper squat, and that's going to be maximizing tension from the floor up. This piece is basically rooting yourself from the floor all the way up, creating as much tension all the way from the ankle, the knee, and the hip. This will increase muscle tension and increase muscle strength, all right? So how this is going to be performed, he's already got his base of support, hip width apart. The next piece is thinking about trying to spread the floor apart. If you watch the push-up video, we had our feet straight ahead. We were trying to rip the floor apart from each other. On this one, we're doing the exact same. What it's going to hypothetically be, I'll move that kettlebell all the way, is if his feet are straight ahead, he wants to try and pull his toes away from each other in counterclockwise position. So his left foot's going to go left, his right foot's going to go right. So go ahead, show that for me real quick. Just rip, yep. So he shouldn't actually be able to turn his feet. Now, I just showed you him rotating his feet out. Now, I don't actually want you to lift the toes or anything like that. I just want you to think about that. By putting pressure into the floor, you guys should not actually be able to lift those toes and rotate them. But what happens is when he spreads the floor in opposite directions, if we watch his knees, go ahead, relax this. If we watch his knees, he's going to actually slightly turn those kneecaps out. He's going to actually start locking out the quad, and other parts of his quad and thigh are going to start engaging. Now that we're properly rooted into the floor, correct tension all the way from the ankle all the way up to the hip, now it's time to actually squat. Now, again, just like the push-up, a lot of people just kind of free fall themselves down. But with a proper squat, you want to engage and activate as much as possible. So instead of what I normally see, I'm going to have Colby just demonstrate a bad squat, just basically a free-for-all squat down with no real control, no real tempo or tension. But when you're doing it with correct load in a heavy fashion, you want to make sure that you're actually engaging and pulling yourself to the floor, so that way you keep tension throughout the whole lower body as well as through the core and the low back. So when we do our squat with a load, especially a goblet squat or a front squat, we want to think about pulling ourselves to the bottom of this movement. I think about it like my feet are gripping the floor like a talon. Someone's pulling me from the ceiling, but I'm trying to pull in resistance to the floor. So what that's going to look like, once he grips that tension into the floor with his feet, his knees are creating tension, his quads are tight, his hips are tight, he's now going to think about actively pulling himself to the bottom of this squat. Now, especially in a front-loaded position as such, where he's doing a goblet squat or a front squat, he wants to make sure his torso is vertical or as vertical as possible. You do see a slight lean on him, but that's actually okay. If he was, go ahead and lean a little bit more, leaning in this fashion, he's got a lot of load off of the center of his midline, and he's creating a lot of torque and tension in his low back. So if you ever squat and you feel tension in your low back or you feel pain, it's because you fall forward. Now the next piece of the proper squat is making sure his chest is vertical. So if he goes to the bottom of the squat for me, what it should look like is, if I was standing in front of him, you can almost see this, but he's got a pretty bright shirt on. You should almost be able to see your belly button if you had a mirror in front of you. The other thing is your chest should be up, okay? So the more vertical your chest is, the more vertical your upper body and torso will be. If, again, he's collapsing his chest, he's going to fall forward, and that's going to be a lot of load in his low back. Now, to gauge the proper depth of the squat, you should be able to sit into about a position where your hip crease is below your knee. So right here is about good. All right. If he was a little higher, go up a little. That's not going to be proper depth on a squat, but he does want to make sure his hip crease breaks his knee. Now, one other common fault I do see with the squat, which does create some low back pain, and especially under heavy load, as well as your tailbone, is a little bit too much depth. So if Colby squats to his normal perfect depth, which is right here, if he goes any lower, he's going to actually start rotating his hips underneath him. In this position, any load is actually not going in a straight line down to his tailbone, but it's actually shearing out. So this is when people will start to create a little bit of tailbone pressure or low back pain. All right, so if you do have that, stay just a little bit higher than what you feel comfortable going to, where it feels like your hips are not rotating underneath you, and then creating tension and keeping it throughout your whole movement. Now we're in the back squat position. So in the front squat, you do have a little bit of more forward tilt. In the back squat, you have more of a vertical loading. All right, so in the front squat, you do have to control that by making sure maximizing upright torso. In the back squat, your main objective here is making sure the bar path is directly over the arch of the feet. Now, all the lower body pieces apply here, so the tension and the torque, the rotation of the feet, creating and pulling of yourself down. Now, big things here is a little bit more obvious, but the vertical torso and vertical chest. So as he squats down, he wants to think about keeping that chest up. He's going to have that bar path, if you guys notice, should be straight over the arch of the feet. And that's about the only real difference in the front squat and back squat. Some faults that might happen here is that as he squats down, if he lets out tension in his midline or core, he could start to collapse forward. So what I like to think about, again, I obviously try and pull myself down to the bottom of that squat position, but I also want to try and take in as much air as possible so I've got a nice solid trunk in. All right, so I think about trying to get as much air into my torso as possible, taking a few nice big breaths. This does apply to the front squat as well as the back squat, and then pulling myself to the bottom of that squat as such, driving out with as much force and pressure as I can, and then I unload my tension. Now that's how you can improve your squat, improve your technique, and get more out of it, as well as really starting to engage and activate the lower body muscles, which will really increase hamstrings, quads, and glute development. So if you really want to improve your butt, your quads, and your hamstrings, make sure that you are doing this right. And now, squatting correctly, you shouldn't be able to do a whole lot of reps if you're doing all these mechanics correctly. You should be maximizing muscle engagement, so you should be fatiguing out a little bit more or a little bit faster than you typically do. So try these new techniques and apply them to your workouts the next time you have squats.